Welcome to the Bible Forum. It's the last Sunday in March, March 31st, 2019. I have to stop and think. I've lived long enough that they all run together. Of late, I have been referring to 2012 as 2002. I don't know what that is happening in my brain, but it's just crazy. But I wanted to share with you how 21st century Americans are just plain ignorant. One recent survey found that 74% of Americans don't know how many amendments there are in the Bill of Rights. Do you know? An earlier survey discovered that 37% of Americans cannot name a single right protected by the First Amendment. I can think of one, what I'm doing right now. Free speech. Shockingly, only 26% of Americans can name all three branches of government. Now, I would think in the days of Trump and what's going on in Washington, that they're talking about this enough that you ought to be able to do that right now. But only 26% of Americans can do that. Public school graduates, no doubt. During the 2016 election, more than 40% of Americans did not know who was running for vice president on either side, neither major party. 40% don't know what's going on. North Carolina is considering passing a law which would mean only scores lower than 39% would qualify for an F grade in North Carolina public schools. What was it when you went to school? When I went to school, an F was 65. Now they want to drop it to 39. It's been, I think, at 60 for quite a while. What is that about? It's about trying to get these kids out of their school. These kids have made a career of going to high school. They can't get out. 30 years ago, the United States awarded more high school diplomas than anybody in the world. 30 years ago. Today, we are number 36. Does that tell you something? And oh, by the way, the standards have been constantly lowered. When my parents went to school, it was an entirely different world. You graduated high school, if you did, and you had probably the equivalent of a liberal arts degree today in terms of what you knew and could regurgitate. When I graduated high school, the standards were much more rigid than they are today. Of course, that was 100 years ago. According to the Pentagon, 71% of our young adults are ineligible to serve in the U.S. military. Why? Well, either they're too dumb, they can't pass the test, or they're overweight, they can't pass the physical, or they have a criminal background. 71%. For the first time, Americans are more likely to die from an opiate overdose than they are in an automobile accident. With 50,000 people dying every year, is that the number? Opioid overdose takes out more than that. One study discovered that 1/3 of all American teenagers have not read a single book in the last year. Not one. Can't read a book while you're texting on your cell phone. You can't read a book while you're doing that. Put the book on the phone. They don't want to read. Maybe they can't. A recent survey found that 45% of teenagers are online almost constantly. Do you have any idea what this means for the future of this country? The future of families, children? Today, the average American spends 86 hours a month right here on a smartphone, doing something or other. And you see them. There are stories of families where the kids are sitting at the table texting their parents with a question. Overall, the average U.S. adult logs 6 hours, 43 minutes of total screen time every day. The average U.S. adult. When do you work? You're working for 8 hours a day. You're traveling back and forth for at least maybe another hour, 7 hours. You're sleeping for 8. You're on this dumb phone or some other machine for over 6.5 hours every day. In more than half of all U.S. states, the highest paid public employee in the state is the football coach. In more than half of our states, nobody's getting paid more than the football coach, public employee. During one 7-day period last summer, a total of 16,000 official complaints about human feces were submitted to the city of San Francisco. I know if you listen to the show, you watch this, you know we've talked about this. But apparently the problem is a very real problem because one investigation found 300 piles of human feces on the streets of downtown San Francisco. Not little pieces, piles. Every 24 hours, more than a third of all Americans eat fast food. You do know fast food is not good for you, right? Oh, no, I go to these places. Fast food, not good for you. A third of Americans eat fast food every day. Less than half of all Americans know which country used atomic bombs at the end of World War II. Do you know? Oh, it was us! Get in the game, period. Get in the game. Even though we fought a war in Iraq for 8 years, 6 out of 10 young adults today cannot find Iraq on a map of the Middle East. That same survey found that 75% of our young adults can't find Israel on a map. They got to get out more. Today, the average college freshman in the United States reads at a 7th grade level. If you use a King James Version of the Bible and you can understand what it's saying, it's at an 8th grade level. They can't read anything over 7th grade. A few years ago, an 8th grade exam from 1912 was donated to the Bullitt County History Museum. Now, to me, it is absolutely amazing that kids living in rural Kentucky were expected to know a little over 100 years ago what they were expected to know. You can find a copy of the exam online. I looked at it quickly and realized that most college students would have a hard time passing that test. In fact, I think it would have been very hard to get a passing grade. Here are some of the questions. Through which waters would a vessel pass in going from England through the Suez Canal to Manila? Well, without a map in front of us, it's a little hard maybe even to visualize that. But that's the caliber of question that's being asked. That's pretty sophisticated. Another question asks, how does the liver compare in size with other glands in the human body? Do you really think kids are learning anything like that? How long of a rope is required to reach from the top of a building 40 feet high to the ground 30 feet from the base of a building? Off the top of your head. Kids can't do this. Compare arteries and veins as to function. Where is the blood carried to be purified? 1912, grammar school. During which wars were the following battles fought? The Battle of the Brandywine, Great Meadows, Lundy's Lane, Antietam, Buena Vista. Are you starting to get the idea here, to get the picture? You're starting to realize that our young people are not actually being educated. Well, nobody cares about all that stuff. They're illustrations, people. It's that kind of questioning. Take it out of its context. Put it into a 21st century context. Come up with the same kinds of questions. These kids are, what, huh? We're not teaching our children to think, to ration, to have a rational approach to life, to be able to think through a problem and come up with a conclusion. We're not giving them an education. Do you think that's deliberate? How many of you think that's deliberate? Raise your hand. It's called the dumbing down of a society. If you want to control people, you got to dumb them down. You got to make them dependent upon you. You know any political parties that are doing that? Oh, look, yes. It's deliberate.